He was a man who had built his life from the ground up. Every corner of his home reflected the years of hard work, determination, and countless sacrifices he had made. From the polished floors to the large windows that let sunlight flood in, every detail spoke of success. Yet behind the grand doors of his mansion, there was a warmth that money could never buy. His mother, a woman who had spent her entire life nurturing and supporting him, sat in the living room knitting quietly, a soft smile resting on her face. She was his anchor. Her life had not been easy. Losing her husband early had left her to raise her son alone, teaching him values of honesty, hard work, and compassion. She had always been the quiet guiding force in his life, the voice that reminded him to stay grounded no matter how high he climbed. He loved her deeply, and she adored him in return. The man's fiancée was the kind of woman who turned heads whenever she entered a room. She was elegant, poised, and seemed to have a charm that drew people to her. To the world, she was perfect. She complimented him at every opportunity, supported his ambitions, and seemed genuinely interested in his life. Friends often commented on how lucky he was to have someone like her, but life, he knew, was rarely as simple as it appeared. In recent weeks, there had been small, almost imperceptible tensions. Sometimes he noticed his mother's quiet frown when they were together. Sometimes he caught a flicker of annoyance in the fiancé's eyes when his mother spoke. He had brushed these aside at first, convincing himself that they were minor disagreements between strong personalities. On this particular evening, he had planned a dinner at home. It was meant to be a celebration. His business had reached a milestone, and he wanted to share the joy with those closest to him. He had invited a few friends and his fiancée, of course. The mother had spent the day preparing simple yet heartfelt dishes, insisting that her son deserved a home-cooked meal to mark the occasion. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, humming softly, while the man checked on the final details in the living room. The fiancée arrived as expected, dressed in an elegant outfit that sparkled under the chandelier. She greeted him with a kiss and a warm smile, then turned her attention to his mother. Her words were polite, perhaps even flattering, but there was a certain stiffness in her posture, a subtle distance in her tone. He noticed it but chose to ignore it, focusing on the positive atmosphere he wanted for the evening. As the guests began to arrive, the house filled with laughter and conversation. The mother moved among them, serving food with a gentle smile, making everyone feel welcome. The man watched her from the side, feeling a deep sense of pride and love. She had done so much for him, and moments like these reminded him of her importance in his life. Later in the evening, after most of the guests had left, he decided to take a short break before serving dessert. He walked through the hallway enjoying the quiet, when he noticed that the fiancé was in the kitchen with his mother. The lights were soft, casting shadows on the walls, and he thought it was a nice opportunity for them to bond. But then he heard her voice. It was not polite. It was not the kind, considerate voice that greeted guests and smiled for the cameras. The words were sharp, cruel even, directed at his mother. She was laughing at something his mother said, but it was a mocking laughter, the kind that belittled rather than enjoyed. His heart sank as he caught fragments of sentences, words that cut deeply, comments about age, about her appearance, about her intelligence. His mother's response was quiet, almost inaudible. She did not raise her voice or retaliate. She simply looked hurt, trying to continue her work without acknowledging the sting. His chest tightened. He could not believe what he was hearing. The woman he had thought was perfect, the one he planned to marry, was treating his mother, who had given him everything, with disrespect. He stayed hidden for a moment, listening, trying to process the reality in front of him. Anger bubbled up inside, but it was mingled with disbelief. How could someone who claimed to love him act in such a way? How could someone so elegant and charming show such cruelty behind closed doors? His mind raced through memories, trying to recall moments he might have ignored, signs he had brushed off. Suddenly, things that seemed minor before, the subtle sneers, the rolling eyes, the impatient sighs, took on a new, painful clarity. Finally, he stepped into the kitchen, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. The fiancée turned, startled, her confident facade faltering for the first time that evening. His mother looked up, a mix of relief and worry in her eyes. She knew he had overheard, and she braced herself for the confrontation she did not want to be part of. He did not speak at first. He simply looked at her, the hurt and disbelief in his eyes more powerful than any words. The fiancée opened her mouth as if to explain, to excuse herself, but he held up a hand. He wanted to understand, but he also wanted her to know that he had seen through the charm, the carefully constructed persona. This was not a misunderstanding. He had heard everything. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in with tension. The mother, sensing the gravity of the moment, quietly moved to the side, giving her son space. She did not speak. She knew that the confrontation was between him and the woman he had chosen to be his life partner. The fiancée's voice trembled as she tried to defend herself, to say it was just a joke, that his mother was too sensitive, that he was overreacting, but he could see through it. There was no sincerity, no genuine remorse, only self-interest and manipulation. The man's heart ached, but a steely resolve began to form. He loved his mother, and no one, not even someone he intended to marry, would ever disrespect her in his presence. That night, he made a decision, though he did not voice it immediately. He would not confront her with anger alone. He would take time, gather his thoughts, and approach the situation with clarity and strength. He could not allow his emotions to cloud his judgment, but he also could not ignore the betrayal he had witnessed. The fiancée, who had seemed perfect, had shown her true colors, and he would not forget it. After the guests left, the house returned to its quiet state. The mother and son sat together in the living room, a comforting silence enveloping them. She did not need to speak. Her presence was enough. He felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness that someone he loved could be so cruel, but relief that he now knew the truth before it was too late. He would protect her, just as she had protected him throughout his life. As the night wore on, he reflected on everything. He remembered the sacrifices his mother had made, the nights she had stayed awake worrying about him, the small moments of wisdom she had imparted that shaped him into the man he had become. He realized that no amount of wealth, luxury, or social status could replace the love and guidance of someone who truly cared. And he knew, deep in his heart, that he would never allow anyone to tarnish that bond. Sleep came fitfully that night, with thoughts swirling and questions unanswered. But one thing was clear. The man who had built an empire would now confront a different kind of challenge. This was not about business or money. This was about trust, respect, and the values he held dear, and he was determined not to compromise them no matter the cost. The next morning, the mansion was quiet in a way it had not been in years. The sun shone through the tall windows, illuminating the living room where the mother sat sipping her morning tea. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried a shadow of hurt. She had tried to brush off the previous night's incident, not wanting to burden her son, but the sting of the words lingered. She knew he had overheard everything, and that knowledge weighed heavily on her. The man moved through the house with a thoughtful expression. His mind replayed the fiancée's words, the mocking laughter, the cruelty. It was as if a fog had lifted, revealing the truth he had refused to see before. He had wanted to believe in her charm, her elegance, the perfect image she presented to the world. But now there was no denying it. She had shown her true self, and it was not who he had hoped she would be. He found his mother in the garden, her hands resting gently on the railing as she looked out at the flowers. He approached her slowly, not knowing if he should speak first or simply sit beside her. When he did, she gave him a small smile, the kind that said more than words ever could. She did not need to hear him confirm what she already knew. She only needed to feel his presence to know he was standing with her. He sat down beside her, letting the quiet moment stretch. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady. He told her that he had heard everything, that he knew the way she had been treated. There was no anger in his words, only sorrow and a hint of determination. She listened silently, her eyes glistening, and when he finished, she took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. They did not need to talk about the fiancé or the confrontation. The bond between them was stronger than any insult, stronger than any deceit. The man spent the morning reflecting on the situation. He walked through the house, thinking about every moment, every interaction he had shared with the fiancé. The pieces began to fall into place, the impatience in her voice when his mother spoke, the subtle, dismissive gestures, the way she had made him feel guilty for spending time with his family. It was all part of a pattern he had ignored, blinded by love and the desire to see perfection. By noon, he knew he could not ignore it any longer. He needed clarity, not just for himself, but for everyone involved. He called his closest friends seeking advice, though he knew deep down that the decision was his alone to make. They listened, offering support and encouragement, but he realized that no one else could truly understand the depth of the betrayal he felt. It was personal, a wound that went beyond the surface. Meanwhile, the fiancée was unaware of the storm that had quietly gathered. She moved through the mansion with a smile, practicing apologies and explanations in her mind, convinced that she could manipulate the situation. But when she saw him, calm yet firm, she realized that something had changed. The playful charm she relied on no longer had the same effect. He was no longer the man who would overlook disrespect for the sake of appearances. The confrontation began in the study, a room filled with sunlight and books that had been read countless times. He did not shout, did not raise his voice. Instead, he asked her to explain herself, to tell him why she had insulted his mother. She faltered, trying to twist her words into something acceptable, but the sincerity was missing. He could see it in her eyes, the fleeting glance of annoyance, the defensiveness that revealed her true character. He listened carefully, his heart heavy but his mind clear. Every excuse she offered, every attempt to minimize her actions, only reinforced his understanding of who she was. He realized that this was not a moment of weakness or stress. This was who she was, someone willing to belittle and hurt others for her own amusement or gain. The mother, sensing the intensity of the conversation, remained nearby but silent. She did not need to intervene. She had taught her son the value of patience, discernment, and integrity. Now those lessons were guiding him as he faced one of the hardest decisions of his life. He knew he had to act, not out of anger, but out of a sense of justice and protection for the woman who had given him everything. After hours of tense dialogue, he made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable. He told her that he would not tolerate such disrespect in his life, especially toward his mother. Her attempts to placate him fell flat. The truth had been revealed and there was no turning back. He could see the realization dawning on her face, the understanding that her charm and manipulation had failed. For the first time, she experienced the consequences of her actions. The rest of the day passed in a strange, heavy silence. The mansion, usually filled with laughter and conversation, felt almost hollow. He spent time with his mother, helping her with small tasks, talking quietly about trivial things to ease the tension. Their connection had always been strong, but now it felt deeper, fortified by shared understanding and mutual respect. In the evening, he walked through the rooms where memories of his life with the fiancée had once seemed bright and promising. Each corner reminded him of the hope he had placed in someone who had ultimately disappointed him. Yet amid the disappointment, there was clarity. He understood now that love could not exist without respect, and no amount of charm or wealth could substitute for genuine character. He resolved to give the fiancée one final opportunity, to leave gracefully, understanding that confrontation alone was not enough. He would act with dignity, not revenge, for his mother's sake and for his own. She could either choose to leave and preserve what little dignity remained, or she could stay and face the consequences of her actions. The choice was hers, but the power no longer lay in her hands. That night, as he prepared for bed, he reflected on the events of the day. The world outside might see a successful man with a perfect life, but the reality was far more complex. Wealth and status could not shield anyone from pain, betrayal, or moral dilemmas. What mattered most were the relationships that could not be bought: love, respect, and loyalty. And in those areas, his mother remained his guiding star, unshaken and unwavering. As he lay in bed, he thought about the future. The fiancé's actions had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths, but they had also illuminated the path forward. He would protect his mother, uphold the values she had instilled in him, and ensure that no one could undermine the integrity of their bond. It was a difficult journey, but one he was ready to face. In the quiet of the night, the mansion felt alive, not with the sounds of argument or tension, but with the enduring presence of love and understanding. The mother slept peacefully, confident in her son's judgment. The man, though troubled by the betrayal, found solace in knowing that he had the strength to face the truth. And somewhere in the darkness, the fiancée realized that the game she had played was over, and that the consequences of her actions were only beginning to unfold. The days that followed were quiet but heavy with unspoken emotions. The mansion, once filled with plans for a wedding, now felt like a place of reflection. The man spent much of his time in thought, going over the events that had unfolded. He had always believed in giving people chances, in looking for the good in them, but this situation had left a deep mark on him. He could not forget what he had seen and heard, no matter how hard he tried. The fiancée had not yet left. She stayed in the guest room, moving carefully through the house as if walking on glass. Her tone had changed completely. She spoke softly, acted kindly, and tried to show care for his mother. But to the man, everything she did now felt forced. He could see that her sudden kindness was not out of remorse but fear of losing her place in his life. His mother, on the other hand, behaved as she always had, calm, dignified, and gentle. She did not complain, nor did she speak ill of the fiancé. Yet there was a quiet sadness in her eyes, the kind that comes from knowing someone you trusted has shown their true self. She spent her mornings tending to her garden and her evenings quietly reading, giving her son the space to handle the situation in his own way. One afternoon, as the man sat in his study going through some papers, his fiancée walked in. She looked nervous but determined. She said she wanted to talk. He put his work aside and listened, though his expression remained unreadable. She began with an apology, saying she hadn't meant to be cruel and that her words had come out wrong. She claimed she had been stressed and that the situation had been misunderstood. He listened without interrupting. Her voice trembled at times, but he could see that it was not sincerity, it was desperation. When she finished, he looked at her for a long moment before speaking. His words were calm but firm. He told her that respect for his mother was not something that could be negotiated or explained away. It was something that either existed or didn't. And from what he had seen, it didn't. She tried to cry, hoping her tears might soften him. But the man had already seen through the act. He told her that real love could never grow from deceit or cruelty. He said he had wanted to believe in her goodness, but her actions had made it impossible. The silence that followed was heavy. She looked at him, realizing that her words no longer held power over him. That evening, she packed her things quietly. The sound of her suitcase rolling across the floor echoed through the hallways. The mother stayed in her room, not wanting to witness the scene. When the fiancé left, she didn't look back. The man stood by the doorway, watching as the car disappeared down the long driveway. There was no anger in his heart, only a deep, tired sadness. It was over. For the first time in weeks, the mansion felt peaceful again. The man and his mother shared dinner together in the quiet dining room. There was no need for words. They simply enjoyed the food, the calm, and each other's presence. It was as if the air had been cleared of something heavy. The mother smiled gently, and he smiled back, feeling a sense of comfort return. In the days that followed, he began to focus on his work again. His employees noticed that he seemed quieter, more thoughtful than before. He didn't talk about his personal life, but there was a maturity in his demeanor that came from experience. He spent his evenings at home, often sitting with his mother, listening to her stories or helping her with small tasks around the house. It was in these moments that he found peace again, but not everything was simple. The fiancée, unwilling to accept her loss, began reaching out to him through messages and calls. She said she had changed, that she regretted everything, that she couldn't live without him. At first, he ignored her, wanting to move on quietly. But as the messages became more frequent, he realized that she hadn't learned anything from what happened. She just didn't want to lose the comfort and lifestyle she had grown used to. He finally replied, sending a simple but firm message. He told her that their relationship was over and that it was time for both of them to move on. There was no anger in his words, just finality. She didn't respond after that, and he hoped she would take it as a sign to let go. The mother was proud of her son, though she didn't say it outright. She had always known he was strong, but now she saw a new kind of strength in him, the kind that comes from protecting what is right, even when it hurts. She often told him that life has a way of revealing people's true faces at the right time, and that it was better to learn the truth before it was too late. As weeks turned into months, life began to feel normal again. The man poured his energy into his company, starting new projects and spending more time with his employees. He made sure to stay close to his mother, taking her out to dinner, planning small trips, and including her in his successes. Her happiness became his priority, and it filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. One weekend, he hosted a small gathering at the mansion for close friends and family. It was not a grand event, but a simple dinner filled with laughter and warmth. His mother sat at the head of the table, her eyes glowing with pride as she watched her son smile again. The atmosphere was different this time. No tension, no false smiles, just genuine connection. During the evening, one of his friends quietly told him that he admired the way he handled everything. The friend said that many people in his position might have hidden the truth or avoided confrontation, but he had chosen to face it with honesty and dignity. The man smiled humbly, saying that his mother had taught him that no amount of success was worth losing one's integrity. That night, after everyone left, he stood by the window, looking out at the city lights in the distance. The reflection of his mother's favorite flowers shimmered in the glass. He thought about how life had changed so quickly, from joy to pain and then to peace again. It reminded him that even the most painful truths could lead to something better. He realized that the experience had taught him something important. People show who they truly are not when life is easy. But when they have power over someone weaker, the way the fiancé had treated his mother revealed everything he needed to know about her character. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. Over time, he began to open his heart again, not to love immediately, but to trust in the goodness of people once more. He knew that not everyone was the same, and that somewhere out there were genuine hearts waiting to be discovered. But for now, he was content with the love he already had, the unwavering love of his mother, who had stood by him through everything. Their bond grew even stronger. The mother often teased him gently about finding someone new one day, and he would laugh, promising that if he ever did, she would be the first to meet her. She would smile knowingly, her heart at ease knowing that her son had learned one of life's most valuable lessons. Love without respect means nothing. As the season changed, the mansion seemed brighter again. The garden flourished, filled with color and life. The man spent his mornings walking with his mother, sharing plans for the future, and talking about the simple things that made them happy. They didn't need grand gestures or fancy events. Peace itself had become their greatest luxury. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, the mother said softly, "Sometimes, losing someone who doesn't value you is the best kind of blessing." He looked at her and nodded, understanding the truth in her words. He knew now that real love, whether from family or a partner, could never exist without kindness, respect, and humility. That night, as the stars appeared one by one, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons, for the strength, and most of all, for his mother. The chapter with the fiancé had closed, but it had opened a new one filled with peace and wisdom. And though he didn't know what the future held, he knew one thing for sure. He would never let anyone come between him and the person who had loved him unconditionally from the start. Months passed, and the mansion that had once been filled with tension now carried only peace. The man's life began to take a new rhythm. His days were spent working on new business ideas and helping charities that supported elderly people. He said it was his way of giving back, but deep down, it was also his quiet way of honoring his mother. She had taught him everything about kindness and humility, and now he wanted to live by those lessons. His mother was happier too. She had started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Every morning, she would sit by the large window, her canvas in front of her, and lose herself in colors. The man often stopped by her side, watching her brush move gracefully, and it filled his heart with warmth. Life had found balance again, yet every now and then thoughts of the past would return. He would think of how close he had come to marrying someone who did not truly care for him or his family. It was a painful reminder, but it also made him wiser. He had learned that love without respect is a hollow thing, and that true love never asks you to choose between the people who have always stood by you. One day during a business meeting, he met someone new. She worked with one of his charity partners. She wasn't the kind of person who tried to impress anyone with her looks or words. Instead, she was calm, respectful, and carried a quiet confidence. He noticed how she spoke kindly to everyone around her, from senior executives to staff serving coffee. There was something refreshing about her simplicity. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of ease in someone's company. He didn't rush into anything. After what he had been through, he wanted to take his time. They met several times in work settings, exchanging thoughts about projects and ideas. Their conversations were always genuine and meaningful. Slowly, a friendship began to form. His mother noticed the change in him, the way his eyes brightened when he talked about his day, the subtle smile that returned to his face one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. His mother asked softly, "You've been smiling more these days. Is there someone special?" He laughed lightly, shaking his head. "Not yet," he said, "but maybe one day." His mother smiled knowingly. She didn't press further. She just wanted him to be happy, and she trusted that he would choose wisely when the time came. Meanwhile, his former fiancée had completely disappeared from his life. She had tried a few times to reach out through mutual acquaintances, but he had no interest in reopening that chapter. He had forgiven her in his heart, not for her sake, but for his own peace. Carrying anger, he had learned, only gave more power to the pain. Forgiveness allowed him to move forward freely. As time went on, his friendship with the new woman deepened. She often visited his charity foundation, and they spent hours discussing ideas to help underprivileged families and senior citizens. He admired her compassion, and she admired his sincerity. What stood out to him most was that she treated his mother with genuine warmth from the very beginning. The mother, too, noticed her kindness. It reminded her of the kind of person she had always hoped her son would end up with, someone who understood that respect and love go hand in hand. One afternoon, while working on a project together, the man invited her to the mansion to meet his mother properly. She accepted happily. When she arrived, she brought a small handmade gift for his mother, a bouquet of dried flowers tied with a silk ribbon. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke of thoughtfulness. The mother was touched, and the conversation that followed flowed naturally. There were no awkward pauses, no pretenses, just three people sharing tea and laughter. Later that evening, after their guest had left, the mother said with a soft smile, "She's different. She carries peace with her." The man nodded, his eyes reflecting quiet agreement. He didn't need to say more. His mother could already see what he felt, but life, as it often does, tested him once more. One of his business rivals spread rumors about his personal life, claiming that his breakup had been because of his arrogance, not his ex-fiancée's behavior. The story spread quickly through social circles and online gossip. People who didn't know the truth began to judge him unfairly. The man tried not to let it bother him, but it was difficult. His reputation mattered not just for himself, but for the many employees and partners who worked under his name. When the new woman heard about the rumors, she stood by him without hesitation. She defended him publicly when others whispered, and privately she reassured him that the truth would always come to light. Her loyalty during those difficult days showed him who she really was. She didn't run away from problems. She faced them with strength and grace. His mother, too, stood by him as she always had. "People can say what they want," she told him. "What matters is what you know in your heart." Those words stayed with him. Slowly the gossip faded and his dignity remained intact. His honesty and humility won back the respect of those who had doubted him. In time, his friendship with the new woman blossomed into something deeper. It was not rushed or loud, but steady and pure. They built their connection on trust, understanding, and shared values. When he finally told his mother that he wanted to take the relationship further, her eyes filled with tears of joy. "I always prayed you'd find someone who loves not just you but your heart," she said softly. The man decided to plan a small dinner to introduce her more formally to his family and close friends. Unlike the lavish celebrations of his past, this dinner was intimate, filled with warmth rather than luxury. Everyone who attended could feel the sincerity in the room. His mother sat beside him, her smile radiant. She watched how the woman interacted with everyone, gracious, kind, and respectful. It filled her with gratitude. After dinner, the man walked his mother to the garden. The air was cool and the night sky sparkled with stars. "You were right," he said, looking at her with affection. "About what?" she asked. He smiled. "About patience. About waiting for the right person. You told me that when love is real, it doesn't come with drama or pain. It comes with peace." His mother nodded, her eyes reflecting pride and tenderness. "And now you understand," she said. As they stood in the garden, he thought about how far they had come. From heartbreak to healing, from betrayal to peace, it had all led to this moment. He realized that everything that had once hurt him had, in some way, prepared him for what was now unfolding. He was no longer the same man who once believed that love was only about grand gestures. He now understood that love was about kindness, consistency, and respect. The following months were filled with happiness. He and the woman continued to grow closer, but he never forgot his mother's presence. He made sure she was always included in their plans, always loved and cared for. The woman understood and respected that deeply. There was no jealousy, no competition, just shared love for the same person who had shaped his life. Sometimes, late at night, the man would think about how things could have been if he had never discovered the truth about his ex-fiancée. The thought made him shudder. He might have spent his life beside someone who didn't value what truly mattered. Instead, fate had given him a chance to see clearly, to choose better, and to protect his heart from false love. His journey had not been easy, but it had been meaningful. He had learned that wealth could buy comfort but not happiness. It could build walls but not trust. The real treasures in life were the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. His mother had been that person for him, and now he was finally surrounded by others who shared those same values. As another year passed, the mansion once again felt alive. The laughter that echoed through its halls was genuine this time, soft, warm, and full of hope. The mother's paintings decorated the walls. The garden was in full bloom, and the man had finally found peace in his heart. He often said to his mother, "You're the reason I found my way." And she would smile and reply, "You just needed to remember who you are." The world outside still admired him for his wealth and success, but those who truly knew him admired him for something far greater, his heart. And though his life was far from perfect, it was real, honest, and filled with love that no money could ever buy. The sun rose softly over the mansion, casting a golden light through the tall windows. The man stood on the balcony, sipping his morning tea, watching the world awaken below. It had been nearly 2 years since his life had changed, since he had seen the truth about his former fiancée and walked away from what could have been a disastrous future. Now everything around him felt calm, grounded, and full of meaning. His mother was healthy, his business was thriving, and his heart finally knew peace. His new partner had become an inseparable part of his life. She wasn't dazzled by his wealth or fame. Instead, she valued the quiet moments they shared. They took long walks in the garden, spent evenings reading, and often talked about how to use their resources to help others. She understood his heart, his fears, and his hopes, and she respected his deep bond with his mother. One morning, his mother called him into her art room. She had been working on a new painting for weeks, and now it was finished. As he entered, he saw a breathtaking image, a family of 3 sitting in a garden, smiling peacefully under a tree. The colors were soft, the expressions gentle. He looked closer and realized the faces resembled him, his mother, and his partner. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His eyes grew moist as his mother placed a hand on his arm. "This," she said softly, "is what peace looks like." He nodded, too moved to answer. That painting captured everything he had fought for: respect, love, and family. A few days later, he decided it was time to take the next step. He wanted to propose to his partner, but he wanted it to be meaningful, not flashy. He remembered how his first engagement had been surrounded by media attention and extravagant displays. This time he wanted something simple and heartfelt. He began to plan quietly, involving only his mother. Together they chose a small garden near the lake on their estate, the same place where he and his partner often went for walks. On the day of the proposal, the sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. He invited her for an evening stroll, pretending it was just another quiet walk. His mother watched from the window, her eyes gleaming with joy. As they reached the lake, he stopped and took her hand. "There was a time," he began softly, "when I thought love was about perfection. I believed it had to look a certain way, feel a certain way. But life taught me that love isn't about perfection, it's about peace. You brought peace into my life when I needed it most. You reminded me that kindness and respect are worth more than anything money can buy." Tears filled her eyes as he knelt and opened a small box. Inside was a simple ring, elegant but not overly grand. "Will you walk beside me in this life?" he asked. For a moment she covered her mouth in surprise, then nodded through her tears. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. He smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger. It was a moment that needed no audience, no applause, just 2 hearts finding home in each other. Back at the mansion, his mother waited by the door. When they returned, she didn't need to ask for confirmation. She could see it in their eyes. She embraced them both, her heart overflowing with happiness. "This time," she said softly, "it's real." They spent the evening together, sharing laughter and quiet joy, the kind that fills a house with warmth. The news of their engagement spread, but this time the world's reaction was different. People admired how the billionaire, once known for his glamorous lifestyle, had chosen simplicity and sincerity. There were no lavish parties or media headlines, just a genuine story of love, loss, and healing. Many found inspiration in his journey, realizing that even those with everything in the world still search for what truly matters: respect, compassion, and peace. As the wedding day approached, the man made sure his mother was involved in every detail. He wanted her to feel part of the celebration because she had been the heart of his healing. Together, they planned a small ceremony in the garden, surrounded by close friends and family. The decorations were modest: fresh flowers, soft lights, and gentle music. The day of the wedding was bright and full of life. The birds sang, the air smelled of jasmine, and every smile felt genuine. When the ceremony began, his mother sat in the front row, holding a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite flowers. As the bride walked down the path, sunlight glimmered on her face, and everyone could see the love between them. When they exchanged vows, there were no scripted words, only promises from the heart. He said, "I promise to love you with respect, to listen with patience, and to never forget the lessons life has taught me." She replied, "I promise to stand beside you, to care for your family as my own, and to always protect the peace we've built together." When the officiant pronounced them married, his mother wiped away tears of joy. The guests clapped softly, and the newlyweds smiled, holding hands as the breeze carried their laughter through the garden. That night, instead of a grand celebration, they hosted a simple dinner under the stars. It was intimate and warm, filled with laughter and stories. His mother gave a small toast, her voice trembling with pride. "My son," she said, "you have shown me that real wealth isn't measured in what we own, but in who we love. Today I see a man who has found not just success but peace, and I couldn't be prouder." Everyone raised their glasses, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. The man looked at his mother, his eyes filled with gratitude. He knew that without her wisdom and strength he might have lost himself to bitterness and pride. She had been his compass, guiding him back to what truly mattered. As weeks turned into months, married life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The couple worked side by side on their charitable projects, creating homes for elderly people and scholarships for underprivileged students. His mother spent her days painting and visiting the art center they had built in her name. The mansion was now more than a home, it was a place of love, laughter, and purpose. One quiet evening, as the family sat together on the porch, his mother looked at her son and said, "You've come a long way. You turned your pain into something good." "That's rare." He smiled and replied, "I learned from the best." They laughed softly, the sound blending with the rustling leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. Later that night, he stood by the window, watching his wife and mother talking and laughing together. It was a simple scene, but to him it was everything. He thought about how life had tested him, how betrayal had once broken him, and how love had healed him. He realized that sometimes, what feels like the worst ending is really just the beginning of something far more beautiful. His journey had taught him that kindness is strength, forgiveness is freedom, and love built on respect is unshakable. The world outside still saw him as a billionaire, but those who knew him best saw something deeper, a man who had rediscovered his soul. The house that once echoed with arguments and tears now glowed with laughter and peace. On his mother's birthday, he surprised her with a gift. He had turned one of her paintings, The Family in the Garden, into a large framed piece and hung it in the main hall. When she saw it, tears filled her eyes. "You made my dream come true," she whispered. He hugged her gently and said, "No, you made mine come true." As years went by, the man often shared his story in quiet interviews and charity events. He never mentioned names or details, only lessons. He told people that real success isn't about rising higher than others, but about staying true to your values no matter what life throws at you. People listened, inspired by his calmness and sincerity. And though time continued to move forward, some things never changed. Every evening he still sat with his mother and wife, watching the sunset, grateful for the peace that had finally found him. The sky would turn golden, the breeze would carry the scent of flowers, and the world would seem just right. In the end, the man understood that life isn't about perfect moments. It's about real ones. It's about falling, learning, and rising again with more kindness than before. He had faced betrayal, loneliness, and judgment, but through it all, he had found something far greater than wealth or fame. He had found love that respected, healed, and stayed. And that, he knew, was the greatest treasure of all.